Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Thriving with Rachael and Dr. Lou. This week we wanted to talk a little bit about how do you navigate burnout and how do you get started, how do you get motivated again when maybe you're burnt out but you kind of have to keep going in some capacity.
That is awful. I know many times where I've been needing to just push forward and I'm like, where am I going to get this? I don't have the reserves. How am I going to do it? And I think part of it is taking a step away from whatever it is you're in and just changing the scenery. Going outside if you're inside.
Pause for 1 second. How are you defining burnout?
So, a couple different ways. Burnout from just doing the same thing over and over again and feeling overwhelmed, whether that's at work or just, putting in extra hours, school, feeling like, when is this going to end? Sometimes there's projects, there's things that are due that just require a lot of extra time. It's more than, the normal workload and you got to get it done. So
nonstop moving.
Yeah.
Multiple hours more than you would normally move in a week.
Yeah.
Leaving less energy.
There's also a burnout, in our field where you've got many people who are struggling in great, just awful situations that we listen and we empathize and we hear these stories of people's experiences, and it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard to hear sometimes, and some weeks you're feeling
draining
more than others. So that's another way of feeling burnout.
Emotional burnout.
Yeah.
Right? Where you're in relationships or, whatever it might be, and you're kind of maybe taking on more of somebody else's stuff. You're very empathetic. Mm-hmm. That could kind of be a burnout too. I guess burnout for most things looks like lack of energy, exhaustion, inability to concentrate. Those are the big ones for me. I don't know if there's other ones for you.
Yeah, definitely those. And I see what do we end up doing when that happens? Mm-hmm. We overeat, and we start drinking, we start sleeping more.
I just want to watch TV.
We just veg out, And I think part of that is a natural reaction because our body's kind of saying to us, stop. You're going way this way, I'm going this way.
Right.
Because you're not meeting me in the middle.
Right.
And I think, bottom line is we need to get to that middle ground, that balance. Now, as I was describing the burnout of, some weeks you just have to put in more hours. There's certain things that just is reality. And, when I did a talk on work-life balance, and I started out by saying there really isn't any. Because there isn't. Because some weeks you're going to put more energy into family. Some weeks you're going to put more energy into work. It all depends on what's going on. Mm-hmm. But I think from a perspective, you need to recognize that we still need to create some downtime, even when we're overwhelmed with work or family or school or whatever it is. And I think how you set up your day is key. We often talk about having routine.
Right. Being
able to stick to that routine as much as possible is one of those ways that we maintain our energy level, maintain our wits about ourselves, and can re-energize ourselves. Mm-hmm. Eating well, being really fanatically disciplined with that. Now, I know that for most of us, we're not fanatically disciplined, and we don't stay on these routines. When we get stressed out, all that goes out the window.
Yeah, I was going to say self-care tends to be the first thing that goes.
Yeah.
But maybe that's something we need to look at as a red flag. The times when I snooze more often, the times that I'm not getting up in the morning to work out, the times that I'm, eating more fast food than usual, not drinking water, the typical self-care tasks when I'm not doing those things, if that is my norm, maybe that is a sign of burnout. Right. And, I interrupted you earlier. You were starting to say kind of like getting outside of that. Were you meaning like physical environment?
Literally, yes. So if you're at the office or in the classroom and you've been, there for hours and hours and hours, you need a change of environment. You need a change of scenery. Get out of the office, go outside, go for a walk. Doesn't matter if it's raining, if it's cold out.
Just do it.
Just do it, right? And it's that break that we need. We need to break up what we're visually seeing, what we're hearing. We need to create that change, and that's a refresher, right? Doing something for a small amount of time that we're not overwhelmed by is one of the ways we can get re-energized for a little bit. So recharge of the battery. So that's what I was talking about.
Okay, so which that would take less energy in general, technically, to just walk outside. Even if it's just standing on the front porch. Walking, I think, is another thing. Because you were mentioning things that were self-care oriented, like working out or eating healthy. When I'm burnt out, that's like the last thing I want to do, which is probably why self-care is the first thing to go. Because sometimes when I'm burnt out, I look at self-care as a chore. As something that's going to require energy that I don't even have the energy, which is why I tend to, order food or, pick up stuff that's already made.
So much for meal prepping.
But I mean, meal prepping, instead of sounding fun and like, this is great for me and fulfilling, it kind of, I look at it the perspective of like, oh, this is going to take forever. Working out, I'm like, I could sleep an extra hour. Like, why do I want to do that? I'm already tired. My body needs rest. It's hard to decide, and then burnout, I think, just continues. So, how do you navigate when I'm burnt out and when I'm maybe just making an excuse not to get up because I'm tired?
Well, that's a good question, but I think you have to just look at your last week or so and what's been going on. Is it that you've been doing more than what you normally do?
Right.
Or are you just sleeping in?
Yeah, and I'm just tired.
And you're just tired. And that might be, you're not sleeping well. That's why you're tired, and that's why you want to sleep.
But we're looking at burnout as more excessive, it sounds like.
Yeah. And so in those situations when burnout is excessive, check in and see, is this time limited? Do I have to like just head down and try to do as much as I can, as best I can for the next 2 weeks, and then I know there's going to be a reprieve.
Right.
If I know there's an end to the, light at the end of the tunnel, it gives me a little bit more energy, a little bit more sense of I can do this. It's kind of like when you have a workout and you're following somebody who's teaching the class, but they're not counting. You're like, oh, how many are we doing? Like, how many are we close?
Right.
If you count, then all right, 3 more, all right, 2 more, all right, 1 more, all right, I'm good.
Right.
It's that idea that if I can give myself a marker, something to look at, then it allows me to have a little bit more strength, a little bit more faith that, okay, I can get through this.
Well, it's more control, right?
Yeah.
Because there's somewhat of a deadline, so you can kind of mentally prepare, if you will, and visualize the end point versus not having one.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it for sure. So setting a deadline, making sure it's not something that's continual. I also think not making excuses for why self-care is not important is important, and recognizing that I don't need to do some strenuous workout or have some elaborate meal prep to still take care of myself.
Correct.
Right? I can plan a bedtime and disconnect from electronics and actually do it. I can order takeout. That's maybe on the healthier side, right? I can go for a walk instead of doing some, workout that I have to sweat through, and then you have to get this whole shower routine and all that. Like, I can scale it back, I think. Making sure I'm not using my burnout or my fatigue as the excuse or the reason as to why I can't take care of myself. Because a lot of times when I engage in that type of headspace, that is ultimately where it goes.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's important.
I think it's important, as you're pointing out here, to notice what can you do. Adjustments. Being able to adapt is really the key to thriving. Whenever life presents those struggles and those challenges that make us more prone to burnout, that's when we have to be willing to be flexible and adapt and adjust what we're doing to fit the situation as best we can. And recognize we're doing as much as we can, as best as we can, and that's okay.
So being compassionate with yourself.
That would go a long way.
Here we go again.
Yeah.
That compassion word comes up frequently.
It does. It does. And there's a good reason for that. The whole other piece is boundaries. We've been talking about boundaries the last couple episodes here, and I think this is just another example of being able to set those boundaries for ourselves, whether that's, making sure that we still go to bed at a decent hour regardless of how much work. Right. Now, in some situations, there might be, somebody lost their job or quit, and now their work becomes your work. Now I'm doing 2 jobs, and I don't know when that's going to end. I don't know when that replacement. What if they decide, well, we don't need to replace that person.
Because
You're doing it, right? So at that point, boundaries come in and say, well, how much am I willing to put out and do within reason that's okay, but I'm not going to be working 80 hours just because I'm making up for the coworker who is no longer here.
And just because somebody expects something of you doesn't mean you have to say okay.
Right.
And to your first point, if we see an end time, we can put out the extra hours sometimes. I can be a team player.
Hopefully.
But knowing my limits, right? Being able to ask myself, what is it that I need? Not necessarily what does the company or this other person need. Because I think that's where burnout tends to happen, is when I'm putting all of my energy into someone else or something else other than myself. And we kind of get confused almost. We get so motivated externally by all these things that are in need of me and my time that I kind of forget, I need my time.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm important too.
So remembering that, I think, and noticing the signs of burnout, I think, are the first thing. So signs that we discussed are extreme fatigue, probably one thing, distraction or difficulty concentrating. I mentioned a couple other things.
Well, the idea of doing things that we don't normally do,
right?
Skipping routines of exercise or eating well, things like that.
Making excuses for not doing self-care. So I think that's a huge sign.
Could be signs of burnout.
Yeah, could potentially. And really identifying, is there an end time with this? Not that we're advocating powering through, but, is there a shorter period of time, or is this maybe long-standing? And asking myself, what do I want? And really being able to set boundaries and advocate for yourself around that, because burnout's a very real thing. Absolutely. Regardless of the profession, or if you're a work-at-home person, or you work-at-home parent, whatever it might be, burnout is an easy thing to get wrapped into, especially with the expectations of society, I think. So really making sure that you're aware of what those signs are and how do you navigate them. So
all right, guys, well, have a good week.
See you next week.